Well, good morning or good afternoon because, some of you are joining us for lunch. Some of you are joining us for your morning coffee or tea or whatever breakfast might be. Some of you are in the middle of the morning. It might be like 10 or 11, depending on your time zone. So either way, I really appreciate you all for being here. Um, for the sake of timeliness, we'll go ahead and get started. I can imagine more people might trickle in as they're able to. But my name is Luis. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm part of both the Latinx knowledge community and the civic learning and democratic engagement knowledge community. I'm the liaison for both KCs with NASPA. So it's a pleasure and an honor to help to host this space alongside both the knowledge communities. So, first I want to start by saying thank you for starting the week with us. This is going to be hopefully as conversational as can be given the circumstance and given the virtual environment session. And with that, I'd like to start off by simply, I'm going to ask folks to simply in the chat write in your name, introduce yourself, and also what institution you're a part of, and if you have a role within either the LKC or the CLDEKC or another way in which you're involved in NASPA, please feel free to drop that so that we can have a feel for who's in the room. But once again, thank you so much for being here. And also I want to give a big thank you in advance to Camille. Camille is with us from Voto Latino, and we've been able to, borrow some of her time and some of her insight as we talk more about everything post-election when it comes to the Latinx community specifically. As you can imagine, it's been an eventful few days, few weeks to say the least. So as we get ready for what comes next, we realize that yes, election day, in a way, some parts of election day are wrapping up. In some ways, they're not wrapping up at all. But in many others, it's a notion of the work needs to continue in many different ways. So, it's great to have Camille here from an organization that is known mostly during election year. Like, you hear of Voto Latino mostly during election cycles and mostly around that voter engagement work. And we are here to talk about some of that, to have some reflections about the past few weeks and the past few months, especially in their work. And also maybe get into conversations about how we can not only engage ourselves in the work that needs to continue beyond the vote, but also in the ways in which we can potentially encourage and empower our students to do the same. So with that, Camille, I'd love to give you the floor. And then from there, we'll field questions. And once again, thank you so much to both the LKC and the CLDEKC colleagues for helping to host this with us. So definitely grateful for you all and grateful for everyone in the room. So once again, questions will come forth. Please feel free to ask them. And then from there, we'll engage into a simple conversation dialogue. It's pretty low key today. So
that sounds great. Thank you for the incredible introductions, Luis. As you mentioned, my name is Camille. I work on the partnerships team at Voto Latino. I do want to preface this by saying I am a 2019 college graduate. I'm a Texas native, went to Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, have been at Voto Latino for about a year and 4 months. It has been an incredible opportunity to work with a great organization this election cycle. I'm joined by Marcela Fuentes. She is our partnerships fellow, and she'll be helping me, lead this conversation and talk through what we have on deck. With that being said, I'm going to share my screen, and it does say that host disabled screen sharing for attendees. Okay, we are good now. Let me share that screen. All right, fantastic. And I always press the wrong button, so please bear with me. So as you all know, this election cycle has been so different, meaning the moment that is COVID, contentious politics that are happening right now in local and national spaces, and just overall student enthusiasm and just like an increase in engagement by young people has really changed so much in the industry. And I'm really looking forward to discussing this with you all. As Luis mentioned, this is extremely conversational. I would love to have a dialogue with you all throughout this presentation. I will, run through some agenda items in this deck just to show you all our portfolio of work from Voto Latino this year, as well as some other interesting, very initial findings we found from this cycle. This should take about 10, 15 minutes maybe to run through, and happy to, again, discuss and field questions after this presentation. So with that being said, here is a very fun infographic. Whenever I look at it, I smile and get really, really excited thinking about the incredible work that our organization did this year. So on the very left-hand side, you'll see our key states in lighter blues. The numbers that are filled out in each state are the amount of registered voters that we activated in each state. So this cycle alone, starting on January 1st, 2020, we registered 601,330 people, really using digital first means, serving ads and other digital methods to potential voters on Google, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, really just meeting the young Latinx voter where they're at. Of that number, we registered 73% of that number was 18 to 39-year-olds, which we're really, really proud of, as that's that demographic we service. And 54%, so a little bit over 300,000 voters, are new voters, which is really, really exciting. We did a very large campaign of mail, pieces of mail. We sent out 4.6 million of them the last 2 weeks before Election Day. We also really deeply engaged with 3.7 million GOTV targets, serving over 6.8 million SMS messages to them, which was very large. We wouldn't have been able to do that without our volunteer army of a little bit over 7,000. With those SMS messages, because voting looked so different this year, we were deeply engaging with those contacts, making sure that they had a voting plan, that they knew how to vote by mail, that they knew where their polling site was. We also offered Lyft rides to folks who said they needed a ride to the polls, and we were able to distribute over 6,000 of those throughout the year. So that was a very high level readout of what we accomplished, but just to meet the COVID-19 moment, we had to shift our strategy quite a bit, because COVID-19 particularly has impacted Black and Brown communities disproportionately. We really worked in digital spaces, primarily on social media, to inform the community about vote by mail. This was tricky though, I will say, because I'm a native Texan. A lot of the community we service are Texans, and vote by mail is not permitted in the state without an excuse, and COVID-19 was unfortunately ruled out to be an excuse that you can use to vote by mail. So really just educating the community about what vote by mail is, number one, but also what safe voting practice look like in their states. We also saw a very large rise of misinformation happen this election, targeting particularly Floridians, Latinx Floridians in the state. So we worked to arm our volunteer network of about 7,000 and our social media following with ways and active steps that they can take to combat misinformation that they're hearing in their communities. Something I'm super proud of, we partnered with Power the Polls to recruit over 200 poll workers. We really, empowered our network to step above just making sure that they registered and that they vote. We encourage them to talk to their friends and family members to make sure that they have a voting plan, and we also encourage them to be poll workers. So just some important notes as well. We surpassed our goal of registration for this year by over 20%. So we did set the goal to register 500,000 folks, and we ended up registering a little bit over 600,000, which is super exciting. And we used, very culturally relevant messaging and graphics and things like that, particularly on our social media, to earn over 466 million impressions. I think Gen Z in particular is just incredibly good at social media and lives in this space, right? So we really had to tailor what we were doing to make sure that we were really engaging Gen Z and millennials with the content we were releasing. And here's just a high-level breakdown of those registration numbers in our key states. So we ran strategic voter registration campaigns in these 6 states in particular, registering a little bit under 500,000 in these 6 states alone. The reasons we picked out these states was because our theory of change at Voto Latino is, once you empower young Latinx, they are, such massive agents of change in this political demographic that we're in right now. So how do we make sure that young Latinx aged 18 to 34 in particular are registered, engaged, and then turn out their family to vote? So we, with high Latinx populations in these states, as well as, just a important amount of influence that this demographic has in these states, that is why we selected them. And it yielded something really great. The largest Latinx voting bloc in 5 states in particular, Arizona, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada, were of voters between 18 and 29 years old. We also had expansive registration efforts in California, Colorado, New Mexico, Wisconsin, and Virginia, and I'm happy to speak to this more if you all are interested in learning more about it. So this comes up to the second point, the youth Latinx vote, and why it is just so critical and so important. As a native Texan, I'm so happy to report that the youth vote is up more than 600% from the last presidential election. This just shows that, so much is happening and young people are just so in tune and want to continue to be in tune to what is happening politically. Nationally, we saw around 2.3 million more Latinx voters turn out in 2020 versus 2016. Which is exciting, but it does show us that, of course, more work needs to be done in this space to make sure that everyone turns out to the polls. So with that being said, we are at the part of the presentation that's about post-election engagement. So I first will talk a little bit about what we're up to post-election at Voto Latino. Then I'll kick it over to Marcela to talk about her ideas of how college students can be involved more post-election. I also have some ideas too, but I will let her go first as she is currently a college student. But yeah, so we absolutely would love for everyone and all people to volunteer with us. It was a very interesting year, saying that very candidly, moving our volunteer presence, which was predominantly in person, to all virtual, all online. We have built out this robust digital organizing platform, and we'd absolutely love for you all to join in. We'll be texting out the vote in Georgia. So if you at all are interested in volunteering to make sure that young Latinx voters in particular get out for the Senate runoff, please text volunteer to our number 73179, and we'll get you all set up with the information you need to be plugged into that programming. Also, if you don't follow us on social media, please do. I love our social media. It's a lot of fun. We really, try to keep the community engaged and informed about the issues that matter, and also share out really amazing things that partner organizations are doing. We'll be running many trainings in 2021 throughout the year. An example is working with Emily's List to make sure that anyone within our volunteer network who may be interested in running for office has all the information, tools, tricks they need to do so. We also have tons of digital organizing fellowship opportunities that will be popping up throughout next year. If you have any incredible students that you think would service our organization well, you can let them know to keep track of our offerings on our website, as they do get posted about every 2 months or so. All right, Marcela, I will kick it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Camille. Hello. So I'm going to talk about some post-election engagement activities that I thought that they will be good for college students. As you know, there are several nonprofit organizations that want to engage students. And I believe that this is a very good opportunity for students to get to know like the issues that they're interested on. So that's a very good way they could start. As well, I think it's very important that students get to assist. And right now, since it is not, well, I don't know, in El Paso it's not possible, but to even watch the city council meetings. Since El Paso has a lot of COVID cases, we're not able to assist to those meetings, but we can watch them. So I think it's important as well to remind the students that they can have the possibility to watch and assist them. And then as well, research local legislation. This is so important because sometimes us as the students, we just don't know what is going on in our city, and we want to take part of it. And I think like if we start researching some local legislation and the way that is going to affect our community, it's going to help us to look forward on how can we help, how can we get more involved. And then another one that I feel that it's so important is lobby lawmakers. Like we need to make our voice heard, and this is a very good way to do it. We can call the local elected officials and then let them know how do we think about some issues, and then as well like we can put a little bit of pressure on them to make the decisions in the way that reflect our views. So it really involves the community in when we take this action. Another one is as well volunteer for local election campaigns. This is so important because I know like so I volunteered for a while ago in March for a local election for a judge. And there are many ways that you can volunteer for a local election campaign. It can be for city council, for a judge, for the Congress. There are many ways that you can take part of it, and students have a very good chance to get involved in early stages of of campaigns when they start doing this volunteer in local elections. Another one, as we have seen with the Women's March, with Know Your Rights, with George Floyd, protesting it's a huge thing currently, and we recommend you to do it safely and smart. We know like sometimes there could be some conflicts, but if you do it safely, if you leave when it's time as well, if you take precautions with you, that's the best way to do it. And just make sure that the persons that are organizing the march or the protest, they have permits, because you can get in trouble if you're protesting. But it's another good way to make your voice heard. You can donate money to a cause, to a party, or a candidate, and that will obviously help them to continue with their race. As well, as Camille was saying, run for office. It's good. You can start small. That's something that obviously you're not going to run for like president at the moment. So but start small, maybe like city council, or yeah, city council, it's the best way. As well, organize. And what I mean with organize, it's you need to mobilize, you need to have a message, and lastly you need to have money to have to run for office. And another way is just don't get discouraged. A lot of people is going to tell you that no, it's not possible, and but it's possible. It's possible, and it's good because young citizens can get involved in your campaign. Another one that I believe it's a huge one. I believe a lot of students have downtime, and what they could do with this downtime is assist to trainings. A lot of organizations are having summits, trainings, webinars, and it is a very, very good opportunity for you to learn, to get involved, to to start networking, and just get really like find other things that you like. And I know that some universities are even putting it on their social media. I know that my university is sharing a lot of trainings that they from other organizations that they believe that they're a good cause. So I really think that this is perfect. Like SS2 trainings, it's a very good thing that students could take advantage of. And just lastly, when it's time to vote, just get to the polls.
Definitely. And I know in many states too, it is a long process to make sure, as you all know, to get polling sites actually on your campus. So be sure that you're having, those conversations with your local's elections office in off election years to make sure that your campus is all set to be able to have students cast a vote in person. I also put some ideas together. When I was a student, COVID wasn't an issue, but breakfast tacos, I went to school outside of Austin, were such a huge regional staple to the area. And it was really fun. We had breakfast taco discussions all throughout 2019. It was a space for students to convene and talk about the issues that matter, that care to them, about what local advocacy looks like, different things like that. We really set some very important guidelines and principles for these conversations. The first being that no faculty or staff members were allowed. I know that may be oh my God, what? But it was just really important to cultivate a space for students to talk about issues that mattered or what they thought was important in a setting that was away from staff and faculty. With that being said, though, I was an intern for our student affairs office. So, of course, just making sure that students and trust are leading these events. The power of the Instagram carousel graphic has been crazy this year. I noticed particularly people who are my age, younger even, really do care about what is on Instagram and how they can educate their followers. So to the right, you can see this amazing, art graphic that actually a friend of mine put together. Thinking through, a lot of folks were very frustrated with Goya because of the political actions their president took. So, and their CEO of the company. So this is how you can make your own seasoning at home, right? So empowering student workers to make Instagram carousel graphics that are widely shareable would be a very great way to make sure that their issues they care about are put front and center. And again, I'm sure many student governments are up to a lot right now, making sure that students are getting what they need during COVID, but of course, encouraging folks to attend those sessions. This was just, a list of some ideas we brainstormed very, on Friday, a little bit today. But I would love to get connected with you all, but also really just discuss what you're thinking right now, what the environment looks on your campus, and how our insight at Voto Latino can be of help.
All right, great. Well, thank you both so much for that great information, the insight, and most importantly for the work that you all have been working on and continue to do. So it really means a lot. As Lindsay mentioned on the chat, please, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you feel comfortable to raise your hand, you're more than welcome to do so as well. And I'm happy to allow the floor to you to verbally ask a question if you need to. But again, chat or raise your hand and whatever works. But in the meantime, I think one question I have to maybe help kick things off is maybe what is one emerging theme or issue that came up during this 2020 election cycle that, at least in Voto Latino's radar, this is what is maybe one or two particular themes that emerged that you're already thinking, okay, we need to fix this for 2022?
Yeah, so themes is in issues themselves that voters care about.
Issues that emerged in the whether it's issues themselves as in issues that they care about, that voters care about, or issues as in voters a new on something when it comes to voter suppression that either emerged or for the first time or re-emerged now. So I'm thinking along the lines of that too.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll answer both parts. The first being back in late June, our organization ran a poll in partnership with EHI's Research Lab to see what that young Latinx voter age 18 to 34, what top 3 issues are that they care about. So what those issues are police reform, number 1, number 2, healthcare, and number 3, the economy with the COVID-19 moment. We really have centered a lot of our work at Voto Latino around these 3 issues. We always have, but especially after receiving that poll and really crunching the data and seeing what voters were thinking, a lot of our messaging, if you look on social media, focuses on these 3 issues in particular. I think moving forward, our organization will have a lot of work to do to make sure that the Biden administration really, keeps their promises of creating accessible healthcare for all and more people, for, helping students out with the student loan crisis, for, making sure COVID is regulated and under control. There are so many things that we'll be keeping the administration accountable to, and we'll be mobilizing people in our network to join us in. Beyond that, we did a lot of advocacy work throughout 2020 on protecting the vote. There were actually 2 lawsuits that our organization put forward in the state of Texas to try to make vote by mail in the state more inclusive. We are still pushing those lawsuits through. We've worked with folks such as the NAACP, Human Rights Campaign, and other partners to really just make sure that our networks are mobilized around the issue of making voting a more inclusive practice in all 50 states.
Awesome, thank you. Marcela, what are your thoughts on some of what you've seen on in your area, especially in the past few weeks, of maybe stuff that you're thinking that maybe whether it's you as a fellow or future fellows in your institution need to continue moving forward, in a similar vein of like, what are some things that you're seeing amongst your peers that maybe, okay, this is stuff that we need to keep in mind as we go into the weeks ahead and even the road to 2022?
I believe a huge one is disinformation. We use social media a lot, like our generation is on social media so often that sometimes it worries me that it's scary how much information is out there, and some folks don't really know if it's reliable or not. So that's something that we should be aware for future elections. It's just I know that Voto Latino was working so hard on the disinformation campaign, and that's something that I admire. It is great because, as I was mentioning, some folks don't really know if it's true or not. And if we continue pushing to really know which information it's the right one, we can be better informed and better citizens in all aspects. So
Yeah, and just to touch on that more, that was so well said. We have a disinformation channel on our volunteer Slack. So any instance a volunteer comes across a piece of disinformation in their community, they're able to flag that in that account. That may be something interesting that university departments can do, right? Like having seminars and information sessions on what disinformation is and what are active steps you can take to combat it. We work with PEN America is one organization that comes to mind. There are quite a bit, and I'm happy to send more information your way if you hear this and you're like, I want to bring that programming to my school. Happy to connect you to the right folks.
Thank you. And thank you all both for bringing that up. I think I even think of certain institutions were part of virtual watch parties for every presidential debate on Discord. And even on the Discord server, they had a fact-checking channel that was all about, like, every time something came up, hey, can you fact check what this candidate said? Can you fact check what they said? So, and we're seeing that even in my institution of, maybe a future conversation simply about disinformation and the need for media literacy. So that's something that's on our radar soon. So that's great. Amy asked a question on the chat, and I'd love to ask it. How has your organization how did you all obtain some of the data that you do have already? Because as as Amy says, I'm wanting to know more numbers on the turnout in 2020. So it's impressive that you'll have some of that information on deck already.
Amy, I will email you a good report I have on numbers. Our data and analytics team is so incredibly good at what they do. I think, numbers are still being crunched, specifically seeing like what demographics didn't turn out to vote. Yeah, I don't really have, honestly, a great answer for this as of now, but I will share all of the resources that I've came across your way. We do have most of the data points that I shared in this presentation were reflective of Voto Latino's own registration numbers. We're working now to get more data points on, how many of that 600,000 we registered did turn out, for example, but I'm happy to send our preliminary graphs and findings on this information.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that all of us that have been, working hard on campuses are, usually it just takes a while. I mean, I know in Nevada we're still counting votes. It takes a while. So I can say that since I live here, but we're working on it. So I just was curious, how you're getting some of that information, and I'm as a professional in this field, I'm just excited to start to see those numbers come out, because we did have to work in different ways, right? This year, we're the same concepts were still the same. We just had to take it different ways. And so I'm just, that's the first information and data that I've seen shared. So thanks for already putting all of that together from your organization.
Yeah, sure thing. I think seeing that 600% increase in turnout number in Texas just blew my mind. Let me dig up and find that article and I'll send it in the chat right now.
Well, more questions trickle in. I have one more for you all. What helps you balance the need, as I can imagine, similarly as how we have to keep our voter engagement efforts as nonpartisan as possible, how do you balance that sense of striving to remain as nonpartisan as possible while not being neutral, especially considering that so many of the issues that our communities face are more than just political standpoints or political issues. They're really like human rights issues and issues that affect us more than just a disagreement, a simple disagreement. So what helps you all, engage with our communities from a nonpartisan yet non-neutral lens, as in like being able to really get to the heart of, okay, this is what our people are really caring about?
Yeah, for sure. That is a line we tiptoe quite a bit and really discuss very extensively in internal conversations. But in that polling we did, for example, with Ecky's Research Lab, learning that police reform, healthcare, and the economy were the top 3 issues of our community, we made sure that we just educated as much as possible around those issues without explicitly stating like, this is candidate's exposition on such matter. For example, when I was a college student, I was a political science major, and I went to, a small liberal arts school. A lot of my friends weren't in my major, which I personally really enjoyed, but they always came up to me and were like, how did you get into politics? Like, I don't even know who to vote for. There's so many people out there. Like, how do I know who aligns with my values the most? And I heard this advice from a professor of mine, but, really just empowering students to pick 1, 2, or maybe 3 issues that they fundamentally care about, and making sure that they do their due diligence and research on those issues. And then if it is a conversation more about candidates, making sure that their candidates align with the issues that they care about.
Great perspective, and that's what helps us out as well. When I think of the work that we constantly do, it's about coming across it from once again going back to the issue of making sure our communities, so whether it's our students, our colleagues, have access to the right information and resources, to them from there making the best decision for them and for what they care about and what they stand for. So great. Marcela, do you have any perspectives on that from a student standpoint?
Yes, as well, just as Camille was saying, I think the best way to do it is to have the right information. And I remember like going to several talks where I have my own perspective on politics, and I'm a political science as well, majoring in political science. But and I have my own beliefs and everything. But it is very important that when I'm working with Voto Latino or with my university or with several student organizations, that I know that I shouldn't be bipartisan, and I should be delivering a message on how is the issue, like, okay, how is going to affect our community, and what are the two perspective of the candidates. Just showing it like that, I think that's the best way to do it, as Camille was saying.
Great. And along with that, what has helped you place specific, because as you can imagine, the Latinx community is not a monolith, as we've talked about several, in several ways, and especially recently, we've talked about, there's a lot of conversations about how Latinx folks have voted, but in general, my question is more so specific to what has helped Voto Latino place specific focus to the identities that are shared within the Latinx community. So I think, for example, from my perspective, my perspective as a Black Latino is different from a perspective as somebody who's not Black, who's Latino, who's Latinx as well. Or the fact that, as well as members of the Latinx community who are part of the LGBTQIA community as well. Or folks, whether you're also thinking of immigration status, that also varies from folks in mixed status families to somebody from Puerto Rico who has US citizenship. So like it all varies. So what has helped you have a good sense of representing the Latinx community as best as possible without making it seem generic? Because I've even seen some of your recent graphics, and even thinking about what's included in those graphics is important because representation matters. So I definitely think about that as well. So, what helps Voto Latino have that sense of inclusion in that regard?
Yeah, we always try to think of everything that we do in an intersectional lens, whether it be, the graphics we put out, the training that we make available to our volunteers, the information that we share out on our website. We try to consider and be supportive of every single, aspect of the community. An example is our 2020 Power Summit. We had partners at GLAD give a media training on telling your story. We work very closely with so many other incredible organizations that are doing work in the progressive space in particular to, provide that programming as well for our community. We really, I know at least our staff is always very perceptive of this. We try to, attend as many trainings as we can, have as many discussions as we can as well. I think more and more work can be done, especially in future elections, to, specifically tell candidates and parties and other big players that, the Latinx community is not a monolith. Very unique initiatives need to be done to tailor to the entire community itself. It's a big question. There's, it's still a lot of work is being done to answer it, but we are really, really critical to that at VL.
And I can add something to it. I think as well, as a fellow, I started working with Voto Latino not long time ago, but it's very important to, and this is something that I love about Voto Latino. It is very diverse, and I think it's a very inclusive organization, and that's something that it's so very important because they have all of these perspectives, and that obviously when they're going to take decisions, our perspective as a fellows and perspective from other regions matter. And when it comes to the table and to discussion, obviously our perspectives are brought up. So it's something that as a students and organization, it's something that you need to consider, having all of this diversity and all of this inclusion, so we can, all of those perspectives matters. And as well, I think we work with partners, and we have very diverse partners as well. So it's something that to our conversation, it brings more value. So it's good that we have that.
Yeah, and an interesting note, we worked with a lot of partners in the music industry space and the tech space this election. So providing relevant programming to have this discussion with their employees was a really interesting bit of work that I did beyond all of our digital organizing. But I think, just making sure that conversations are had in every and any space is really important.
Awesome. Thank you. Lindsay dropped a question for us. So Lindsay says, as someone from in North Carolina, will that state remain a target for 2022? I know on our campus, our Latinx student population is growing a lot.
Absolutely. North Carolina is incredibly important to us in particular. We will very much so continue our programming there. Very happy to report that.
How do you engage in states that are not as big on the priority list? So say, what are some ways to have in which you have had a presence, even in states that are not exactly in a high priority list like this, like North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Florida, etc.
Yeah, so we still do, of course, our broader social media. Our volunteer network is representative of all 50 states plus Puerto Rico, which is really exciting to report. We also have registered individuals in all 50 states. I think, it's interesting being a national organization and extending our mission far and wide, but, we do keep our larger, bigger paid investment programming into states where we believe young Latinx can really make big influence in politics.
And I think this question was more specific to Marcela, but I think both of you, I think it's important, especially in the spirit, now that, that we go into this last 15 minutes, I think a question that I had was, what helps you both, in terms of taking care of, these issues are difficult issues. For many of us, it's, again, more than just a job, more than just a political perspective, but rather very much our lives. So, in this spirit of post-election engagement, the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition released a resource. And one of the first recommendations they make as far as post-election engagement is to first allow space for processing and for taking care of, that sense of taking care of yourself, protecting your health, and also allowing space for processing and reflection. So what helps you both, as individuals, and you're more than welcome to speak to organizationally how, as an organization, you'll have championed this as best as possible of, before the fight continues, to making time to take care of yourself. So what has helped you the most? What resources, when I think of Marcela, what are some resources on your campus that have helped you? Or what are some things that you've tapped into? Camille, what are some things that have helped you as well to be able to protect your health mentally, physically, otherwise, so that you're able to keep going? Because that's something that we continue to see, whether it is campuses hosting post-election spaces with their counseling centers, or even what you're seeing on social media, the sense of exhaustion, of even the fact that so much of what is typically done by now is something that we're continuing to deal with when it comes to a lot of the issues that our communities face, So I definitely wanted to make space to ask that question.
I believe that is a very important question, because after the election, we kind of I personally think that I burned out. I was excited and anxious, and then it was a lot of emotions going on. So for me, I had to take a moment to kind of disconnect. I was okay, I'm not gonna open social media. I need to stay away from this. I need some time for me, and to spend some time with my family, to meditate, to do a little bit of yoga. And something that my school does that I really like is that they offer something every month. Every Monday of the month, they offer yoga classes online. So it's something that I have joined the sessions and it helped me to relax. So it's something that if university push more towards that, it's very good. And as well, they have another session called like This Matter, where students have the opportunity to talk about issues that they care about. And another, like we had the opportunity to talk about this, like about elections and how we were feeling and how are we going to cope with the results of it. So I think having the opportunity to have safe spaces, it's very good for students.
Yeah, I know this year in particular has been different. Not being able to physically be with people, right? I'm extroverted. I actually do get my rest from being with others, which is crazy, but that is the way I function. But you know, with my small circle of friends, we started playing a lot of Among Us, doing other stuff virtually, game wise, right? So I think being able to provide your community with also outlets that aren't necessarily that, you know, activities that aren't political, if that makes sense, right? Like come to this space, we'll play this game together, we'll check in on each other, and that's it. We don't have to talk about the election or anything. I think is needed for a lot of folks right now.
Absolutely. For me, it's gone anywhere from spending time with my wife to, you know, she actually got me a Switch for my birthday, and that's been a source of joy, as silly as that sounds. And I think of the time, even though I can't see my family physically there in Florida and in Chicago, like being able to stay in touch with them has been helpful as well. So, similarly as you, I'm more of an ambivert. So I receive that energy from others, but I also enjoy the times when I can step back and recharge. So that's also been some of the sources of a lot of taking care of my mental health. And on that topic, ongoing visits with a counselor and a therapist. I made sure to schedule one the Friday after election day, and I say that to destigmatize that notion of like, hey, it's okay to be able to seek a counselor or a therapist, and it's not only okay, but also incredibly important, even if you're only needing a space to air out concerns. So I definitely appreciate that. Amy, thank you so much for sharing the article from Headspace about election anxiety. That was very helpful as well. Magdalena asked, how do you handle misinformation / false narratives during the election and post-election? And I know that y'all touched on this briefly, but maybe what are some of the top ways that have helped you handle that?
Yeah, so a lot of folks have been seeing misinformation in WhatsApp groups with their family, church communities, wherever they may be speaking to people on WhatsApp. So we've partnered with the Disinformation Defense League to provide a training for our volunteers on how to, first of all, identify it and how to discuss. There's also, I'll dig it up right now and share it because it's an incredible resource, but PEN America put together a kind of like quiz interactive game website that really walks people through how to find disinformation and how to de-escalate it in an effective way. So I'm going to put myself on mute and dig that resource up for you all. Be right back.
I think another way to find out is to do a further research. Like my mom always arrive and it's like, oh, have you heard about this? And I'm like, Mom, wait, like let's look it up together. And that's what we do. It's like, okay, let's go into Google, and then we search like the sources where she's finding. It's like, no, Mom, like this is not the right one. Like, look, we have this other thing. So that's what we do. Like that's what I do with my mom.
I chuckled when WhatsApp came, because it's I definitely saw some of those like WhatsApp, like, hey, share, you know, similarly as the email chains and the message chains, hey, share this to save a life. And it's, if anything, following that would put more lives at risk, whether we're talking coronavirus, you know, especially when you think of coronavirus, or even the political environment we're in. So yeah, I mean, some more resources have shared. So Amy shared a great media bias chart. I can definitely vouch for this. We share this as well with our students. And it makes me think of, for example, especially when protests were happening in June around the topic of police brutality and Black lives and all that. I think of the reactions that our families had when seeing those things and how they were being covered by Latinx leaning media sources and, you know, those conversations. So I think, you know, I remember those conversations and about and that need for us to really be aware of, you know, of the fact that, you know, we have to look at the way in which media sources lean one way or another, but also about the reliability and the true commitment to that reliability of the information that's being shared. I will also echo what's being shared in the chat of the invitation for you all to write an NASPA blog on this topic. So I will echo that. If you have space and bandwidth in your workload to collaborate on writing that, I will co-sign on that idea from Magdalena. Yeah, thank you for that. In these last few minutes, I'd love to open, whether it is for the both of you, if you have any final words of advice and thoughts for our community, or also for anyone in this space. I mean, it's only 13 of us here, so I mean, if any of you would like to share a brief reflection or a final question for our guests or anything like that, and then of course our guests, if you'd like to share any final thoughts, I'd love to, so that way we don't rush into that. I'd love to open it up now so that we can just simply open the floor up for anyone who'd like to speak about anything that you've heard in this past hour.
I'd be glad to say something. This is Magdalena. First of all, thank you for all of you who organized this. It's wonderful. And it's good work. I believe that our Latinx, Latino vote is going to continue to be very important. We understand from each election that we represent so many different perspectives, obviously not a monolith in terms of how we vote. And for us at the college campus, representing and helping students, one of the things I've noticed is that during this coronavirus period, there have been a lot of panel discussions sponsored at college campuses on various topics related to Latinos. And I think that that's the movement that we need to continue and that we can do very easily on our college campuses. And NASPA would be a great avenue to just encourage that every campus have a panel session on Latino issues, and especially right now, because everyone is very interested because of the election, because of the coronavirus, talk about Afro-Latinx issues, getting along, learning how to handle misinformation, having courageous conversations with students. There are so many opportunities. And if we all sponsored a session on our campus with students, faculty, and staff to discuss these issues and keep doing it, I think that would really be helpful in the long run to help our community understand the importance of getting out and letting people know what we think.
Absolutely, Magdalena. Thank you so much for that. Completely with you. Anyone else?
And I have hoped to hopefully recruit some volunteers to get out the vote in Georgia. Again, I'll drop it in the chat, but we would absolutely love for you all, your offices, your students, whoever it may be, to join us to text out the vote in Georgia.
I'm also writing it down on my notebook too for seeing how we can embed it in our office.
I always say our work is never done.
Yes.
Exactly. La lucha sigue. Any final thoughts? Maybe from our co-chairs from either the CLD, EKC, or the LKC, or both. If you're more than welcome to share some thoughts. Amy, Martha.
It puts us on the spot. But yeah, I mean, I just want to thank everybody for coming together and talking about this important topic. I know our knowledge community at the CLDE is very thankful for Luis as a liaison to our knowledge community, bringing in ideas and different thoughts. And, you know, and like I said, our work is never done. We do truly believe this is a year-long commitment for civic engagement. And so just know this isn't the end of hearing from us. You'll keep hearing it over and over of more things that we can keep doing year round. So I just want to thank everyone for being in this space and allowing us to have this great discussion.
I echo what Amy says. Thank you, Luis, and everyone from Voto Latino, the CLD, EKC. The LKC is really thankful, but also always willing to learn as well. So we know that, like it's been said before, this is a continuous conversation. So we're hoping to have more of these types of events so folks know that it's not just when you need to elect someone that you need to be up to date on these issues, but it's everyday life. So thank you so much for sharing your time, the space, and your knowledge. So thank you very much for organizing this.
Absolutely. Thank you again to all of you who are a part of this. Big thank you to Camille and Marcela for your sharing your insight, sharing your stories, advice, and resources, and of course, again, for all the work that you all do. Lindsay, thank you for helping us to keep the space together here logistically. Really appreciate you. And thank you all for being for such great questions and such a good conversation. I really appreciate you all. I hope this helps to get your morning and your afternoon started and your week started in a purposeful, powerful way. We'll stop the recording, but I'll stick around for a minute or so in case any of you have any questions or would like to keep connecting. But